The creature lay bleeding in the alley, its mangled legs twitching. As alien passers-by completely ignored its desperate chirps, all 6 of its intelligent eyes glazing over as its life slowly drained away into the gutter. Ithorian diplomat Marek glanced at the injured animal with cold disgust. He turned to the human beside him. "Leave it, Terran. It is not our way." Ricky Holmes, the human representative, crouched down, meeting the suffering creature's gaze. It was a native Reptavian, a cross between a ferret and lizard, with iridescent scales losing their luster as its breathing grew more labored. Ricky scooped the animal into his arms. It weakly curled against his chest, seeking warmth. "Oh, you would let it die when we have the means to help?" Ricky asked incredulously. Around them, crowds of Ithorians flowed through the busy street of their advanced metropolis, not one sparing a sympathetic look for the dying animal. "It is weak, unfit. Nature must be allowed to cull it," Marek said. "I will not warn you again, human. Release the creature. You are here to negotiate a trade deal, not meddle in Ithorian affairs." Marek's tone sent a clear threat. The trade deal and humanity's alliance with the Ithorians hung by a thread. Antagonizing them now could spell disaster for the Terran Confederation. Millions relied on securing Ithorian technology and resources. Ricky glanced down at the Reptavian, its life force fading in his arms. Steeling his resolve, he turned and strode back to his quarters, the injured animal held protectively to his chest. He would deal with the consequences later. For now, he had a life to save and a point to make. For the next few days, Ricky dedicated all his free time to nursing the Reptavian back to health in his quarters. He cleaned and dressed its wounds, hand-fed it nutrient-rich meals, and kept it warm and comfortable. As the creature's condition improved, its scales began to regain their luminous sheen. Ricky decided to name it Sparky due to the vibrant, glowing patterns that danced across its body when it moved. Sparky proved to be remarkably intelligent, quickly learning to respond to simple commands and communicating with a complex series of chirps and trills. Ricky found himself growing increasingly attached to the creature, marveling at its resilience and unique personality. One evening, as Ricky sat with Sparky curled in his lap, a loud banging on his door startled them both. Marek burst into the room, his face contorted with anger. Ricky stood, placing himself between Marek and Sparky. "Sparky is still recovering. If I let it go now, it won't survive." "You dare defy our traditions," Marek seethed. "Your actions are an insult to our way of life. You have no right to interfere with the natural order of things." "Compassion and empathy are universal values," Ricky argued. "They transcend cultural boundaries. I couldn't just let Sparky die when I had the power to help." Their heated exchange drew the attention of passing Ithorian officials, who began to gather around Ricky's doorway, murmuring amongst themselves. Some appeared outraged by the human's audacity, while others seemed intrigued by his unwavering stance. Marek turned to address the growing crowd. "Do you see what the human's presence has brought? Discord and a challenge to our most fundamental beliefs. This cannot be tolerated." Ricky stood his ground, Sparky huddled behind his legs. He could feel the weight of the Ithorian's stares, the tension in the air palpable. What had started as a simple act of kindness had now escalated into a battle of ideologies, with Ricky at the epicenter of a growing divide among the Ithorian people. As the whispers grew louder and more heated, Ricky knew that his next words and actions could have far-reaching consequences, not just for himself and Sparky, but for the future of human-Ithorian relations. As the controversy surrounding Ricky's actions spread through the Ithorian populace, Sparky's recovery progressed at an astonishing rate. Ricky spent hours observing the creature's healing process, marveling at how quickly its wounds closed and its scales regained their vibrant luster. He began to document Sparky's behavior, noting the intricate patterns of its bioluminescent communication and its remarkable adaptability to new environments. The more Ricky studied Sparky, the more he realized that the Ithorians had grossly underestimated the potential of these creatures. He discovered that Sparky's species possessed an unparalleled ability to regenerate damaged tissue, as well as a complex language based on the pulsing and flashing of their iridescent scales. Ricky hypothesized that these unique traits could have significant implications for fields like medicine and communication technology. Excited by his findings, Ricky decided to present his research to the Ithorian scientific community. He hoped that by demonstrating the value of preserving and studying these animals, he could change the Ithorians' perception of them as mere pests. Ricky compiled his data and prepared a detailed presentation, eager to share his discoveries with his Ithorian colleagues. However, when Ricky arrived at the Ithorian Research Institute, he was met with a chilly reception. The Ithorian scientists, many of whom had already heard about his unorthodox actions, regarded him with suspicion and disdain. As Ricky began his presentation, he was repeatedly interrupted by skeptical questions and hostile comments. "This is preposterous," one Ithorian scientist exclaimed. "You expect us to believe that these vermin possess some kind of hidden potential? They are nothing more than a nuisance to be eradicated." Marek, who had positioned himself at the front of the audience, stood up and pointed an accusing finger at Ricky. "This human's meddling could have catastrophic consequences for our ecosystems. He has no understanding of the delicate balance that we have maintained for centuries. His ignorance and arrogance will be our undoing." As the room erupted into a heated debate, Ricky found himself at the center of a maelstrom of criticism and condemnation. Even some members of his own diplomatic team began to express doubts about his actions, fearing that his stubborn defiance of Ithorian traditions could jeopardize the crucial trade negotiations. Ricky stood his ground, passionately arguing for the importance of compassion and the pursuit of knowledge. He knew that his research held the key to unlocking the secrets of these extraordinary creatures, and he was determined to make the Ithorians see their true worth. But as the controversy intensified, Ricky realized that he was fighting an uphill battle. The Ithorians' deeply ingrained beliefs and prejudices would not be easily overturned, and his own people were growing increasingly wary of the diplomatic fallout his actions might cause. With tensions rising and the future of human-Ithorian relations hanging in the balance, Ricky knew that he would have to find a way to bridge the gap between their two cultures, before it was too late. He looked down at Sparky, who had accompanied him to the Institute, and saw in the creature's eyes a glimmer of hope and understanding. Together they would have to navigate the treacherous waters of Ithorian politics and scientific dogma, fighting not only for the lives of these remarkable animals, but for the very soul of a society that had lost its way. In the face of mounting pressure and opposition, Ricky remained steadfast in his commitment to Sparky and his groundbreaking research. He retreated to a secret laboratory, where he worked tirelessly alongside a small group of Ithorian scientists who had been convinced by his impassioned arguments. Together they delved deeper into the mysteries surrounding Sparky's species, uncovering clues that pointed to a startling truth. Late one night, as Ricky pored over ancient Ithorian records, he stumbled upon a series of logs detailing the early days of Ithorian space exploration. His eyes widened as he read accounts of a neighboring planet, rich in biodiversity, that had been colonized by the Ithorians centuries ago. The log spoke of a delicate ecosystem thrown into chaos by the Ithorians' presence, resulting in the extinction of countless species and the forced migration of others. Ricky's heart raced as he cross-referenced the records with his own findings on Sparky's biology. The pieces fell into place. Sparky's kind had not evolved on the Ithorian homeworld, but had instead adapted to survive here, after being driven from their native planet by the Ithorians' actions. Armed with this explosive revelation, Ricky requested an audience with the Ithorian leadership. He stood before Marek and the council, his voice steady, as he presented the evidence of their ancestors' mistakes. Gasps and murmurs filled the chamber as Ricky laid bare the unintended consequences of Ithorian colonization. "We have a moral obligation," Ricky declared, his gaze locked with Marek's, "to protect and preserve the remaining species from the planet we disrupted. Sparky's kind and countless others are not mere pests to be discarded, but survivors of a world we helped destroy." The council erupted into a frenzy of debate, with some Ithorians vehemently denying the allegations, while others grappled with the weight of their history. Marek, his face contorted with anger, accused Ricky of fabricating lies to undermine Ithorian sovereignty. As the arguments grew more heated, Ricky realized that his revelations had struck a nerve deep within Ithorian society. The very foundation of their beliefs and traditions had been called into question, and the cracks were beginning to show. Some Ithorians, moved by Ricky's words, began to voice their support for change, arguing that they must atone for the sins of their past and work towards a more compassionate future. Others, however, remained entrenched in their convictions, insisting that the natural order must be upheld at all costs. With tensions reaching a boiling point, Ricky knew that the future of not only Sparky's species, but the very soul of Ithorian society hung in the balance. He braced himself for the battles to come, determined to see his mission through to the end, no matter the cost. In the dead of night, a group of hooded figures crept through the dimly lit streets of the Ithorian metropolis. They moved with purpose, their steps swift and silent as they approached Ricky's quarters. The leader of the group, a burly Ithorian with a deep scar running down his face, signaled for the others to take up positions around the entrance. Inside, Ricky slept fitfully, his mind still reeling from the day's events. Sparky lay curled at the foot of his bed, the creature's bioluminescent scales pulsing softly in the darkness. Suddenly, the door to Ricky's quarters burst open, the lock shattered by a powerful kick. The hooded figures stormed into the room, their eyes glinting with a zealous fervor. Ricky bolted upright, his heart pounding in his chest. He reached for the comm device on his bedside table, but one of the intruders swatted it away, sending it skittering across the floor. Two of the Ithorians lunged for Sparky, attempting to grab the creature and stuff it into a waiting sack. The commotion drew the attention of Ricky's Ithorian allies, who had been keeping a watchful eye on his quarters. They burst into the room, engaging the intruders in a fierce struggle. In the chaos, Ricky managed to scoop up Sparky and make a break for the door, but not before one of the traditionalists landed a vicious blow to his ribs, sending him stumbling. Ricky's allies quickly subdued the attackers, restraining them as Ithorian security forces arrived on the scene. Ricky, clutching his bruised ribs, watched as the would-be kidnappers were led away in shackles, their faces twisted with hatred and disgust. News of the attack spread like wildfire through Ithorian society, sparking a wave of outrage and condemnation. Many Ithorians, even those who had previously been skeptical of Ricky's actions, were appalled by the use of violence to suppress dissent. They began to question the rigid adherence to tradition that had allowed such extremism to fester. In the aftermath of the incident, Ricky's diplomatic team issued a formal statement, condemning the attack and calling for a thorough investigation into the Ithorians' past colonization efforts. They demanded that the Ithorian leadership take responsibility for their ancestors' actions and work to protect and preserve the displaced species. The statement sent shockwaves through Ithorian society, forcing a long-overdue reckoning with the consequences of their past. Ricky and Sparky, once seen as outsiders and troublemakers, now found themselves at the center of a growing movement for change. As tensions continued to mount, with traditionalists and progressives squaring off in heated debates and public demonstrations, Ricky knew that the road ahead would be long and treacherous. But with Sparky by his side and a growing coalition of allies, both human and Ithorian, he was determined to see this fight through to the end. The fate of an entire ecosystem and the soul of Ithorian society itself hung in the balance, and Ricky, the unlikely catalyst for change, found himself at the heart of a struggle that would define the future of two worlds. As the aftermath of the attack on Ricky and Sparky reverberated through Ithorian society, a groundswell of support for their cause began to emerge from an unexpected quarter. A group of young Ithorian activists, galvanized by Ricky's unwavering commitment to compassion and the preservation of life, took to the streets in a massive, peaceful demonstration. Thousands of Ithorians marched through the heart of the metropolis, their voices rising in a unified chant. They carried signs emblazoned with images of Sparky and other displaced species, demanding an end to the long-standing policies of neglect and indifference. Protect the displaced, preserve our biodiversity, the demonstrators cried, their words echoing off the towering buildings. The sea of protesters flowed through the city like a river of change, their bioluminescent markings pulsing in a synchronized display of solidarity. Ricky watched from the sidelines, his heart swelling with hope as he witnessed the birth of a new movement. The Ithorian leadership, faced with the undeniable force of public opinion, found themselves backed into a corner. The threat of widespread civil unrest loomed on the horizon, and they knew that inaction was no longer an option. In a historic moment, the Ithorian Council agreed to open formal negotiations with Ricky and his diplomatic team. They gathered in a grand chamber, the air thick with tension as Ricky prepared to present his proposal. "We have a responsibility," Ricky began, his voice steady and clear, "to right the wrongs of the past and forge a path towards a more sustainable future." He laid out a comprehensive plan, detailing the establishment of protected habitats for displaced species on both the Ithorian homeworld and the colonized planet. He proposed a joint human-Ithorian research initiative aimed at studying these creatures and developing long-term conservation strategies. The Ithorian leadership listened intently, their expressions shifting from skepticism to grudging respect as Ricky outlined the potential benefits of collaboration. They recognized the opportunity to not only address the ecological crisis, but also to forge a stronger bond with the human delegation. After hours of intense deliberation, the Council reached a decision. They would implement Ricky's proposals, committing resources and expertise to the conservation efforts. It was a momentous victory, a turning point in the history of Ithorian-human relations. Marek, however, was conspicuously absent from the negotiations. Embittered by his defeat and still clinging to his traditionalist views, he stormed out of the chamber, vowing to continue his opposition to Ricky's efforts. As the negotiations concluded and the hard work of turning plans into action began, Ricky and Sparky found themselves thrust into the spotlight. They became the faces of the conservation movement, symbols of hope and change for a new generation of Ithorians. In the weeks and months that followed, Ricky worked tirelessly alongside Ithorian scientists and conservationists, overseeing the establishment of protected habitats and research facilities. He marveled at the resilience and adaptability of the displaced species, learning more about their unique abilities with each passing day. Sparky, now fully healed and thriving in his new role as an ambassador for his kind, accompanied Ricky on his travels, a living testament to the power of compassion and the importance of preserving life in all its forms. Together they inspired countless others, planting the seeds of a new era in Ithorian society, one in which tradition and progress could coexist, and the value of all life was recognized and cherished. But even as they celebrated their hard-won victories, Ricky knew that the road ahead would be long and challenging. Marek's ominous warning lingered in the back of his mind, a reminder that change never came easily, and that there would always be those who resisted the march of progress. In the bustling laboratories of the newly established conservation facilities, Ricky hunched over a microscope, his eyes widening as he studied a sample of Sparky's blood. The vibrant, iridescent cells danced before his eyes, their movements unlike anything he had ever seen. "Dr. Zareth, come take a look at this," Ricky called out to his Ithorian colleague. "I think we've found something incredible." Dr. Zareth, a brilliant xenobiologist who had been among the first to support Ricky's efforts, hurried over to the microscope. She peered into the eyepiece, her large, expressive eyes blinking rapidly as she processed what she saw. "By the stars," she whispered, her voice trembling with excitement. "The cellular regeneration is unlike anything I've ever seen. This enzyme, it could change everything." Ricky nodded, his mind racing with the implications of their discovery. "We need to study this further. If we can isolate and synthesize this enzyme, it could revolutionize medicine on both our worlds." As the news of the groundbreaking discovery spread, the Ithorian leadership eagerly embraced the idea of a joint research project. The potential for scientific advancement and positive publicity was too great to ignore. Ricky and his team threw themselves into their work, spending long hours in the lab as they sought to unravel the secrets of Sparky's remarkable biology. However, their progress did not go unnoticed. Zortex Pharmaceuticals, a powerful Ithorian company with a reputation for ruthless business practices, soon caught wind of the enzyme's potential. The company's CEO, a cunning and ambitious Ithorian named Drixus, saw an opportunity to seize control of what could be the most lucrative medical breakthrough in generations. Drixus, who had long-standing ties to Marek and his traditionalist faction, began to exert pressure on the Ithorian government. He demanded exclusive rights to the enzyme's development and distribution, arguing that only his company had the resources and expertise to bring the new treatments to market quickly. Ricky and his allies were appalled by Drixus's blatant attempt to monopolize the enzyme. They knew that if Zortex gained control, the treatments would be priced out of reach for all but the wealthiest Ithorians and humans. The very people who stood to benefit the most from the enzyme's healing properties would be left to suffer. In a tense meeting with the Ithorian leadership, Ricky made an impassioned plea for the enzyme to be treated as a public good. "This discovery belongs to all of us," he argued, his voice ringing with conviction. "It was made possible by the conservation efforts that your people embraced, by the species that we fought to protect. We cannot allow it to be exploited for the benefit of a few." The Ithorian leaders, torn between the promise of scientific progress and the pressure from Zortex, found themselves at an impasse. As the debate raged on, Ricky and his team redoubled their efforts in the lab, racing against time to unlock the full potential of the enzyme before Drixus and his allies could make their move. Sparky, ever present at Ricky's side, seemed to sense the gravity of the situation. The creature's scales pulsed with a determined rhythm, as if urging Ricky and his colleagues to press on in their fight for what was right. As the battle over the enzyme's future intensified, Ricky knew that he was facing his greatest challenge yet. The stakes were higher than ever before, with the fate of countless lives hanging in the balance. He would need all of his courage, determination, and the support of his allies, both human and Ithorian, to navigate the treacherous waters ahead. But as he looked into Sparky's eyes, seeing the trust and understanding reflected there, Ricky knew that he could not back down. He had started this journey with a simple act of compassion, and he would see it through to the end, no matter the cost. The future of two worlds and the very essence of what it meant to be a sentient being hung on the outcome of this struggle. In the shadows of the Ithorian night, a sleek black transport ship descended silently towards the lush bioluminescent canopy of the protected habitat. On board, a team of heavily armed mercenaries checked their weapons, their faces obscured by dark helmets. They had been hired by Zortex Pharmaceuticals to infiltrate the sanctuary and capture specimens of Sparky's species, no matter the cost. Miles away, Ricky jolted awake as an urgent message flashed across his comm device. Dr. Zareth's face appeared on the screen, her expression grave. "Ricky, we've intercepted communications between Zortex and a group of mercenaries. They're planning to raid the habitat tonight." Ricky leapt from his bed, adrenaline surging through his veins. "Assemble the Rangers. We need to stop them before they can harm the creatures." Sparky chirped anxiously, sensing the tension in the air. Within minutes, Ricky and a hand-picked team of Ithorian Rangers were speeding towards the habitat, their hovercraft skimming low over the dense foliage. They arrived just as the mercenaries were breaching the perimeter fence, their weapons at the ready. "Hold it right there," Ricky shouted, his voice amplified by the hovercraft's external speakers. "You're trespassing on protected land. Lay down your weapons and surrender peacefully." The mercenaries responded with a hail of blaster fire, forcing Ricky and the Rangers to take cover behind the hovercraft. The air crackled with energy as the two sides exchanged fire, the peaceful night shattered by the sounds of battle. Ricky ducked low, his heart pounding in his chest as he returned fire. Beside him, Sparky darted back and forth, its scales flashing in a dizzying pattern of colors. Suddenly, the creature leapt from the hovercraft, racing towards the mercenaries with a determined chirp. "Sparky, no!" Ricky cried out, fear gripping his heart as he watched his friend charge into the fray. But as he watched, Sparky began to emit a blinding, pulsating light, the intensity growing with each passing second. The mercenaries, momentarily disoriented by the dazzling display, faltered in their attack. Seizing the opportunity, Ricky and the Rangers surged forward, engaging the mercenaries in close combat. The clash of weapons and the grunts of exertion filled the air as the two sides grappled in a desperate struggle. Amidst the chaos, Sparky darted between the combatants, its flashing scales creating a mesmerizing distraction. The mercenaries, their focus divided, found themselves outmatched by the determined defenders. As the battle reached its climax, Ricky found himself face to face with the mercenary leader, a hulking figure armed with a vicious-looking vibroblade. They clashed in a flurry of strikes and parries, their weapons sparking with each impact. With a final desperate lunge, Ricky managed to disarm his opponent, sending the vibroblade spinning into the darkness. The mercenary leader, realizing the tide had turned, signaled for his team to retreat. They fled into the night, leaving behind a scene of destruction and chaos. Ricky, his chest heaving with exertion, turned to survey the aftermath. The Rangers, battered but victorious, tended to their wounds and secured the perimeter. Sparky, its scales still flickering with residual energy, chirped triumphantly as it bounded to Ricky's side. The successful defense of the habitat marked a turning point in the struggle for the future of the displaced species. News of the mercenaries' defeat spread like wildfire, sparking outrage among the Ithorian public. Calls for an investigation into Zortex Pharmaceuticals and their ties to Marek grew louder with each passing day. Under immense pressure from its citizens and the galactic community, the Ithorian government launched a full-scale inquiry into the company's activities. As the investigation progressed, a web of corruption and deceit began to unravel. Damning evidence emerged of bribes paid to high-ranking officials, including Marek himself, in exchange for favorable treatment and access to restricted resources. Internal memos and leaked communications painted a picture of a company driven by greed and a blatant disregard for the well-being of both the Ithorian people and the displaced species. The revelations sent shockwaves through Ithorian society as citizens took to the streets in massive demonstrations, demanding accountability and change. The once unassailable edifice of Ithorian tradition and power began to crumble as the scandal exposed deep-rooted flaws and inequities within the system. At the center of the storm, Ricky and Sparky found themselves hailed as heroes, their actions a catalyst for a long-overdue reckoning. But even as they savored their hard-won victory, they knew that the road ahead would be fraught with challenges and resistance. The Ithorian High Council convened an emergency session, their faces grim, as they reviewed the damning evidence against Zortex Pharmaceuticals and its corrupt leadership. The council members, many of whom had been swayed by Ricky's impassioned arguments and the bravery demonstrated by him and his allies, knew that swift action was necessary to restore the public's trust and forge a new path forward. In a unanimous vote, the council moved to strip Zortex of its power and influence, freezing the company's assets and revoking its licenses to operate within Ithorian jurisdiction. Marek and his co-conspirators, including the disgraced CEO Drixus, were promptly arrested and charged with a litany of crimes, ranging from bribery and corruption to endangering protected species. As news of the arrest spread, crowds of Ithorians gathered outside the council chambers, their voices rising in a chorus of support for the government's decisive action. Many held signs bearing the images of Ricky and Sparky, hailing them as heroes who had opened the eyes of a nation. In the days that followed, the Ithorian government worked tirelessly to implement a series of sweeping reforms aimed at preventing future abuses of power and ensuring the ethical development and distribution of medical treatments. A new regulatory agency was established, tasked with overseeing the research and production of pharmaceuticals and other medical technologies. The agency, staffed by a diverse team of Ithorian and human experts, set stringent guidelines for the protection of indigenous species and the equitable sharing of benefits derived from their unique biology. It was a bold step forward, one that signaled a fundamental shift in the way the Ithorians approached their relationship with the natural world. Ricky, still processing the whirlwind of events that had transpired, found himself at the center of a new chapter in Ithorian-human relations. The Ithorian leadership, recognizing the pivotal role he had played in exposing the corruption and championing the cause of conservation, approached him with a historic proposal. In a formal ceremony attended by dignitaries from both worlds, Ricky was officially appointed as the first human ambassador to Ithorian. The position, created specifically to foster greater understanding and cooperation between the two species, came with a mandate to promote scientific collaboration, cultural exchange, and environmental stewardship. Ricky, humbled by the trust placed in him and driven by an unwavering commitment to the values he had fought for, threw himself into his new role with the same passion and determination that had defined his journey thus far. He worked closely with Ithorian officials to expand the network of protected habitats, ensuring that the displaced species, including Sparky's kind, would have the space and resources they needed to thrive. Under Ricky's guidance, a state-of-the-art research facility was established, dedicated to unlocking the secrets of the unique biology of these creatures and developing innovative medical treatments based on the remarkable enzyme found in Sparky's blood. The facility quickly became a hub of scientific excellence, attracting brilliant minds from across the galaxy. And at the heart of it all was the bond between a man and a creature, a bond that had started with a simple act of kindness and grown into a force for change that would reshape the destiny of two worlds. Ricky and Sparky, now inseparable, stood as living symbols of the power of empathy and the incredible things that could be achieved when individuals dared to challenge the status quo and fight for what was right. As Ricky looked out over the sprawling research facility, watching as Ithorian and human scientists worked together in harmony, he felt a sense of pride and purpose that he had never known before. He knew that the road ahead would be long and filled with challenges, but with Sparky by his side and a growing network of allies united in their cause, he was ready to face whatever lay ahead. The future, once so uncertain, now shone with the promise of a new era of cooperation, compassion, and discovery. And Ricky, the unlikely catalyst for change, knew that he would spend the rest of his life working to build a world where the values he held dear would become the foundation for a brighter tomorrow. As the years passed, the bond between the Ithorian and human civilizations only grew stronger. The medical breakthroughs derived from the miraculous enzyme found in Sparky's species had saved innumerable lives on both Earth and the Ithorian homeworld. Ricky, now a venerated leader and diplomat, worked tirelessly to further the causes of conservation and compassion that had come to define his life's work. But as the research into the enzyme and its source species deepened, a disturbing truth began to emerge. Dr. Zareth, her face lined with worry, pulled Ricky aside one evening in the lab. "Ambassador Holmes, I'm afraid we have a serious problem." She led him to a display filled with charts and data, pointing to a series of alarming trends. The enzyme, for all its miraculous properties, is having an unintended effect on the species itself. Over time, it's causing sterility, leading to a gradual but steady decline in their population. Ricky felt his heart sink as he absorbed the implications. The very thing that had brought hope and healing to so many was now threatening the survival of the creatures he had fought so hard to protect. The revelation sparked heated debates among the scientific community and beyond. Some argued that the needs of the many outweighed the needs of the few, that the continued use of the enzyme was justified by the lives it could save. Others, Ricky among them, maintained that the preservation of biodiversity and the moral obligation to the species they had already once driven to the brink of extinction took precedence. Anguished discussions filled the halls of power on both worlds. In conference rooms and council chambers, Ricky passionately advocated for the species' protection. "We cannot sacrifice their future for our present," he argued, his voice ringing with conviction. "If we lose them, we lose a part of ourselves, a part of what makes us truly sentient beings." In the end, after countless sleepless nights and soul-searching debates, Ricky made the agonizing decision to phase out the use of the enzyme and redirect the focus to alternative treatments. It was a choice that met with fierce resistance from some quarters, those who couldn't see past the immediate loss of the miracle cure. But Ricky, steadfast in his principles, weathered the storm of criticism. He poured his energy into developing new therapies, rallying the greatest minds of both species to the cause. And slowly, step by painstaking step, they began to find new paths to healing, ones that didn't come at the cost of an entire species. As the decades passed, Ricky and Sparky, both now old and grey, watched from the observation deck of the protected habitat as the species slowly recovered. The sight of hatchlings scampering through the undergrowth, their scales shimmering with vibrant, healthy hues, brought tears to Ricky's eyes. Yet even as they celebrated this hard-fought victory, the scars of the past lingered. Ithorian society, forced to confront the consequences of their choices and the hubris that had nearly led them astray, struggled to find a new equilibrium. Ricky, in his waning years, often reflected on the lessons of his extraordinary journey. The price of progress, he realized, was eternal vigilance. The temptation to prioritize expedience over ethics, to sacrifice the voiceless for the sake of the vocal, would always be with them. But he took solace in the knowledge that his legacy, and the legacy of those who had fought alongside him, would endure. That future generations, inspired by their example, would continue to strive for that delicate balance between compassion and responsibility, to be a voice for those who could not speak for themselves, and to remember, always, that the true measure of a civilization lay in how it treated the most vulnerable among them. One evening, as the twin suns of the Ithorian homeworld dipped below the horizon, Ricky sat with Sparky in the gardens of the research facility. The old creature, its scales now more silver than iridescent, rested its head on Ricky's lap, chirping softly. Sparky's eyes, still bright with the intelligence and understanding that had first drawn Ricky to him, met his gaze. In that moment, a lifetime of shared struggles and shared joys passed between them, a bond that transcended the boundaries of species and spoke to the universal language of the heart. As the last light of day faded and the stars began to emerge, Ricky knew that whatever challenges lay ahead, whatever new frontiers awaited, the spirit of what they had accomplished would live on, a testament to the power of compassion, the strength of the human spirit, and the unbreakable ties that bind all living things in the vast tapestry of existence. You have reached the end of the story. If you enjoyed this story and want to support us, please leave a like and subscribe to our channel, and for every comment that says 88, I will heart every single one of them. Thank you for your time.